everyone, welcome back to my channel. So this is going to be kind of a part 2 to my earlier video that you saw. This is going to be my top 10 books that I read in 2018 but weren't published in 2018. So these are backlist titles, and I don't think many of them are actually like that old. They just happen to be ones that I didn't get to like in 2017 or 2016, but they made the list, so I feel the need to talk about them, especially because some of them I feel like don't have enough love and they deserve more. So jumping right in, I'm gonna start from number 10 and work it down to number 1 for the year, and it's gonna be a ride. I have a lot of contemporary on here because I feel like I read a lot of contemporary that's really hard-hitting that I feel like are very important books, but I also have I have some fantasy, dystopian, horror. There's other genres mixed in, I promise. So coming in at number 10 is going to be on a lot of people's top 10 list because this book, it didn't come out in 2018, but I feel like it got discovered in 2018. And that is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book blew everybody away, but I feel like everybody was reading this in like the late spring, early summertime. That's at least when I read it, because this is a book that I would never have picked up had it not been for the hype. So this is one of those rare books that like the hype got me to read something that I absolutely adored. So sometimes the hype is worth it. But this follows a kind of like Audrey Hepburn, Marilyn Monroe fictionalized character, but is just very similar to like old famous Hollywood women's status. And this character was so rich and well written that I feel like she's real. Like I feel like I finished this book and I wanted to go look at her IMDb page and like read her life story. But this follows a woman who is kind of telling her life story to this journalist so that she can write her biography, and she is going through all of the marriages that she went through, all of the ups and downs in her acting career and old Hollywood lifestyle. Like I said, none of these things were buzzwords for me. Like none of them were enough to get me to pick this book up until I saw so many people raving about it. And I cried, I laughed, like this was such an emotional roller coaster read that it had to be on the list. So this came in at number 10 on my backlist titles. Coming in at number 9 is Autobiography by Christina Lauren. This is a book that I've wanted to read for a very long time, and I finally got around to it this year, and oh my god, I fell so in love with this book. This was such a beautiful LGBT romance that like our YA world needed. It touched on so many like controversial topics in such a healthy way. So this is following a bisexual boy who is like a transplant into this town in Utah that is not very welcoming of the LGBT world. So he's closeted in this, but he also starts to fall for this writing aide who comes to help him work on this like novel project that he has in his school. But religion starts to play a role in this because of some restrictions or structure that people grow up with in their life, so they have a hard time accepting who they are and they fight it. And this just handled it in such a sweet and healthy way. I adored this book. I laughed, I cried, so many emotions in this book. I loved it so much. Coming in at number 8 is a book that I am so glad that I finally picked up this year, and that is Starfish by Akemi Dawn Bowman. This book obviously has won awards, and this was one of the harder books that I had to read, but this is following a girl who is Japanese American, and she has struggled her entire life with her Japanese side to her identity. Her parents are no longer together, and her father was the Japanese half of her Japanese American identity, and so she has pretty much grown up with her mother, who just pushes white culture on her constantly and makes her feel like crap about being Asian. And it's heartbreaking to read, and there's a lot of like tipping points for this girl of like when she's gonna get pushed too far. And it also deals with some triggering things, so there are content warnings when it comes to like sexual abuse and like cultural identity abuse, because I feel like that's a thing that people deal with, and bullying and just like self-identity in general. But her abusive uncle ends up moving back in with them, and that's basically like the last straw for her. So she is very passionate about art, and when she doesn't get into her dream art school, her whole life kind of crumbles because she has so many bad things going on in her life that this was like her like beacon of light in the future, and when that falls through, she doesn't know what to do with herself. So it's a journey of self-discovery with art and with identity and culture, and it is just woven together so beautifully. I adore this book. If you guys have not read this, read it. It's so well done. It's hard to read, but god is it worth it. Moving into a little bit of fantasy, a book that I picked up this year is one that I have had on my shelf for a very long time, but I was wary of picking it up because of the amount of these retellings that exist. And that is Hunted by Megan Spooner. This is a very reflective cover, so I'm going to try and not blind you guys. So this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I know, there's a lot of these. This, in my opinion, is the best one that I've read. And I am a huge fan of the Ekutar series, but I still think that this one is better. So this obviously follows the story of Beauty and the Beast, but what I think was so unique about this is that it changes perspectives between our Beauty character and our Beast character, and the Beast chapters were so primal and bestial, and that is mainly what, like, got this book on this list for me. I just love that his perspective was legitimately animalistic and beast-worthy. Like, he isn't necessarily this romantic figure that you're like, oh, it's okay that he's a beast because he's hot. He's not. He is, like, an animal, and it was just, this book was so well done. Like, this, in my mind, reads as a perfect standalone fantasy, and I can't wait for her new release of 2019, because it's a Robin Hood retelling. And if this is any inclination of what her writing is going to be like in future retellings, I'm sold. The next book on my list is What to Say Next by Julie Buxbaum. This book kind of came out of left field and, like, slapped me in the face and was like, love me. And I said, okay. So this, okay, first of all, ignore this cover. This cover does not fit this book at all, and that's a big part of why I didn't pick it up, because this looks like a fluffy summer romance. It's not. So this is dealing with a boy who is on the autism spectrum, and his kind of issues and his life and daily struggles with, like, fitting in with society and at his school. And it also follows a girl who is dealing with grief because her father passed away and she's not processing it very well, and their friendship and how their relationship helps both of them kind of overcome issues that they've been struggling with. But if you guys like the show Atypical on Netflix, which is one of my favorite shows, this is Atypical. This reads exactly like that, and it is such an eye-opening internal view of what it's like being autistic and how you deal with social issues and how society faces you. It was so well done. Like, this book needs a new cover desperately because I feel like not enough people are picking it up because of the cover, but this is so hard to read that it's not fluffy. It's not represented well. These are my thoughts. Okay, moving on to the next book. Number 5 is The Serpent King by Jeff Setner. I finally got around to reading this. I knew it was going to be a 5-star read based on, like, my friends' reviews of it and what I've seen of this. Oh man, I was not prepared for the emotions that this book brought on. So, as I was reading this, I was getting used to the characters and the setting and just kind of the, like, backwoods Tennessee environment that we're dealing with when it comes to racism and homophobia and all, like, cultural issues that the Deep South sometimes faces. Not all the times, but just in general, they're represented in this book. And I was going along for the ride. I was enjoying myself. It was going to be a solid, like, 4-star read. And then, like, things happen in this book. I'm keeping everything spoiler-free, so I'm not going to tell anything that happens in this book. But this is one of those books that blindsided me because I was just going along. I kind of knew some tragedy was going to strike at some point based on, like, how powerful the reviews were for this book. I sobbed through, like, the entire second half of this book, and it takes a lot for me to, like, physically react to books. Like, I cry from time to time. I tear up. I had to stop because I couldn't read the words on this page while I was finishing this book. And things like that are an inclination that it is solid writing and that it hit me as hard as it should have. Oh man, this book, it was intense. It had to make the list, and it's pretty far up on the list. So if you guys are like me and you're, like, the last people in the world to have not picked this book up, pick it up. It's pretty great. Coming in at number 4, I have If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. This is, again, a book that I never would have picked up had it not been for a buddy read that I was doing in October with a bunch of my friends. This was stunning. This is, like, a piece of modern literature to the nth degree. I have never read a book that I think was so well crafted, and this is, again, one of those stories that, like, didn't really sound that appealing to me because it's following a bunch of young adults, college-age students who are in this academy of, like, very prestigious acting, like Shakespearean acting, and their entire lives are Shakespeare. Like, that's what their life is. We're following kind of what was happening back then and present day as one of these young adults is now being released from jail because somebody was murdered while he was there. And we're kind of following back and forth between the events that took place then and, like, everything that was leading up to that point and the backtrack of him telling his story and how they meet. These characters were so well written. that, like, I was so attached to them, and none of them are characters that I would normally like in books. So this is just one of those books that just came out of nowhere and was like, you love me. And I was like, you know what? You're right. I do. This is stunning. It is extraordinarily written. I don't know how to, like, sing this book's praises because I feel like I'm not worthy of the writing of this book, so I'm just gonna tell you to read it. It's good. Coming in at number 3 is Scythe by Neil Shusterman. I finally got around to reading this because Thunderhead also came out this year, which is featured in my previous video. I'll leave it linked down below. But this book was so good. I've been reading Neil Shusterman for, like, years and years at this point. Like, I read all of his older stuff, and then he kind of took a weird break, and then came out with this. And this, I was just like, what happened in that weird break? Because his previous books were really good and thought-provoking, but then this happened, and I was like, whoa, your writing is so good. This is set in a, like, kind of dystopian world where everything has evolved past the point of death, as in there's no more diseases, there's no more viruses that are killing people, and everybody can just kind of age and age and age and reverse the aging process so you can kind of just keep on living. So the only way to manage population is by deeming these people, the right to kill. And these are the only people who can distribute death into society, and it's kind of an honor to be chosen by a scythe. It's just, every single page was thought-provoking in this book. Every single concept that he threw at you made you question your own ethics and morality because, like, you agree with everything. Everything in this makes sense in the world, and it's just, it was so well written. If you guys haven't picked this series up, I definitely recommend it. Coming in at number 2 is Far From the Tree by Robin Benway. I don't have a copy of this yet, and I plan on getting it because I feel like I need it on my shelf. This book is following 3 adopted siblings who are all adopted into different families and different lives and didn't really know that the others existed. And it's their story of tracking each other down and coming together and developing a family relationship with people that they didn't think existed, basically. This was another one of those books where I was reading it and I was loving these characters, everything was going along well, and then I just broke down. And I think it's one of those stories where the writing speaks for itself, because I was just going along, reading, loving these characters, loving the story and the relationship as it was developing, and out of nowhere, I was so emotionally attached to these characters, and things that happen in this book are things that I can in no way relate to, like situations that I have never been in, and I don't know anybody who's been in it, but I was so invested in it when pivotal things happened, I just broke down with the characters. So you get so emotionally attached to these characters in situations that you most likely can't relate to, and you get that response. I'm gonna declare that amazing writing, and I have been thinking about this book ever since I read it. It just came out of nowhere, blew me away, and I will forever read anything that Robin Benway writes at this point. I highly recommend it, along with a box of tissues. Coming in at number 1 is a book that I just picked up, and I am so glad that I did. I saw a bunch of my friends reading this and reviewing it, and I was like, oh, I want to pick that up at some point, because it sounds like my type of story. And then I found out that the author is actually Shauna Maguire. It's her horror pen name. I live under a rock. I didn't know that Myra Grant is Shauna Maguire, and she wrote Into the Drowning Deep. This book is my favorite book of 2018 of backlist books. Like, I feel like this one is rivaling The Poppy War with how much I'm thinking about it, how much the story stuck with me, and how much I adored it. It was one of those books, I listened to it, and the entire time that I was listening to it, I just had the thought in the back of my head constantly being like, I love this. I love this so much. This is everything that I want in a book. And I kept having to pause and be like, that was amazing! So this is a horror story that basically is taking mermaids or sirens, like they're kind of interchangeable, how the myth goes, and keeping them true to mythology. Like, sirens and mermaids are dark creatures. They are not the Little Mermaid. They are women who are these monsters who lure men to their deaths and eat them. Like, that's the true myth behind the whole mermaid thing. So, in this world, we are on a ship with scientists, with animal behaviorists, with marine biologists, and animal specialists who are going to the Mariana Trench because that's where they believe mermaids exist. And it's basically the science behind everything, and that, I think, is what got me about this book. I am huge into veterinary medicine and animal behavior sciences, and this included everything that I love, and I totally was nerding out the entire time because a lot of like the veterinary practices and the science in it was so accurate to a fictional thing. It was done so well. So I think I'm going to make an entire video about this where I can actually ramble to like my heart's content, but for the sake of this video, I highly recommend this book. If that sounds in any way intriguing to you, pick it up because it was so satisfying. Like this, I'm still thinking about it. I'm still gonna go back and reread it because I think it was so well done. And these mermaids, they were dark. They were a murdering folk, and it was amazing. I loved it. It was so great. It was #1. So that's the stack plus Far From the Tree. So that is my backlist top 10 of 2018. So this combined with the previous video are my top 20 books that I read of the year. And I know that's a lot of books, but I am upwards of like 160-ish books to finish the year out. So having to narrow down to 2 top 10s was even hard for me. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys have read any of these, let me know down in the comments what you guys think of them, and let me know what your favorite book of the year was. That's a hard thing. Let me know like your top 5 if you can't narrow it down. That's fine. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in my next one.